Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. This week, our guest is Paul Donovan, who is the founder of Donovan Legal PLLC. Welcome.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me.
So, Paul, tell us, what was it that made you decide to get into law and become an attorney?
Sure. My father, you've probably heard this story. I come from a line of people in the legal profession. My brother's an attorney. My father was an attorney for 50 years up in Boston. My grandfather worked in the district attorney's office up in Boston. So it's a lineage thing. So a classic way of finding your way into the legal profession. When I was in high school, my dad asked me, he said, what do you want to do for a living? Typical father-son conversation. I said, well, Dad, I want to be a lawyer just like you. And he said, well, okay, you can't be a lawyer just like me anymore. Now you have to specialize. So what do you want to specialize in? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, what are you good at? I said, math. He said, okay, tax law. Perfect. So I found, I was very good at the numbers. And so I became a CPA and an attorney, but I also love real estate. So I found a niche focusing on real estate tax law.
Gotcha. So that's a whole lot of education going around in there before you really get going, right?
Yeah, yes, a lot of tests,
right.
A lot of years.
So, I guess what about the real estate intrigues you? They kind of got you to where you specialize in that.
Yeah, I've always, I just like the 3D nature of real estate. I've always enjoyed the brick and mortar. It's you can touch and feel and see, the work that you are working on, the projects that your clients are doing in various countries and various locations. It's very 3D. And I did a little bit of real estate development myself. So I enjoy the whole creative process of the real estate cycle from concept to completion, working with, the vision of your clients and what they see, and how each piece of real estate to them, every project is just a blank canvas. And what they're able to do with it. It's fascinating how they're able to, change space.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the common mistakes that you find people are making when they're getting into, investing in the real estate market, and then also, if they get into the development side of things?
Yeah, well, as with any entrepreneur, usually the mistakes that they're making at the beginning is not putting together the proper advisory team before they move forward. I don't know if you are familiar with the Squid Game that was on Netflix.
Yep.
Okay, there's a contest in the Squid Game where the contestants have to go from one platform to the other, and they have to go step on these glass steps. And if they step on the wrong glass step, well, they fall to their demise, right?
Right.
But there was one contestant who actually was a glassmaker, and he can tell which of the steps was tempered and will hold them and which wasn't. Well, it's a lot easier when you're operating a business if you know which step to take. And if you listen to your advisor who tells you, this is the one that's tempered, this is the one that's not, as you're going through the concept and the formation and the operation of your business. So the mistake I see clients making is not consulting their advisory team before they take those steps.
So now I talk all the time about having, your financial team, and I'm going to assume here that your advisory team is going to be a little bit different than what I say that is your finance team. So on the real estate side of things, who would you say would be, on your advisory team?
Well, yeah, I mean, a typical advisory team would certainly include your lawyer, your accountant, both your financial accountant and your tax accountant, mm-hmm. And you're just your financial advisor, because real estate investing often involves taking on debt and taking on investors. So you need to know somebody who knows finance very well and is able to to use their resources and contacts in getting investors to invest in your project. So that's the team you should have in place and ready to go whenever a decision needs to be made. You want to consult them beforehand. Clients always like to consult in hindsight, right? The mistake I always see clients make, it's not the questions that they're asking, it's when they ask the questions, right? Ask first before you take the next step. Oftentimes, and I'm sure you've seen this, clients will ask in hindsight, hey, I just did this. I just bought this property. I just formed this entity. What do you think? What should I do? Well, I think you should have called me first before you put your real estate into a C corporation, right?
Right. Right. What are some of the, because you've been doing this for a number of years, you've run across a bunch of different, individuals, from ones that are savvy in what they're doing and ones that aren't. What are some of the biggest fears that they have, and how do you help them overcome those fears?
Well, it depends. In the beginning, from a tax point of view, everybody's fear is an IRS examination, right? So I try and allay those fears by saying, first of all, the chances of being audited are very low. But with proper compliance and proper planning, even if you do get audited, we manage your tax risk exposure by doing the proper planning and the proper compliance. And so, you really shouldn't be worried about those things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But from a legal point of view, I see the biggest fear is the unknown. Like a lot of times, clients, while they may know real estate, right? They may know how to build something. They may know the real estate market. Real estate developers can come from various different backgrounds. But when they actually start doing it, they realize there's a lot more involved. There's a lot of legalities, a lot of papers, a lot of contracts, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming to them. And so what we try and do is simplify the process and take away a lot of the jargon, and focus on what's really important. Because the paper can be involved in a real estate deal, can stack high, and that can be very overwhelming to especially a new entrepreneur in real estate.
Right. So, in that scenario that you're talking about, the volume of paper and things like that, and you even said it, that, this is your specialty, and it sounds like your dad gave you some really good advice in the fact of, hey, you need to find a specialty, because many times, we do think, or at least people think that, oh, you're an attorney, you can do everything. Can you kind of talk a little bit on that and why it's important to have, a professional like you, if you want to get involved in real estate, to have a professional like you to help them?
Sure. Another profession, like a medical professional. Okay, well, not every doctor is a brain surgeon. Okay, not every doctor does everything. Same thing with lawyers. Nowadays the law is so complicated, so vast. Lawyers must specialize. Even in tax law. In tax law you have corporate specialists, pass-through specialists. You have estate planning specialists. Just because the volume and the depth and complexity of the law is just so vast. So it's very important when you're putting together your advisory team that you put together the appropriate advisory team, lawyers, accountants, financial people who have expertise in your industry, real estate, corporate lawyers, tax lawyers, the contract lawyers, but not just any old contractor. You want contract lawyers and tax lawyers and professional advisory accountants who know real estate, because real estate is very specialized.
Right. So, going through COVID, I know at least in our area, there's a lot of, commercial real estate that's sitting empty right now,
Yes.
Because of, various different reasons. How are you helping people combat that if they're coming to you now and saying, hey, I want to, I want to develop something?
Well, I mean, one person's problem is another person's opportunity, right? So while the current owners may be sitting on a piece of property not generating revenue but has a high amount of debt, that creates an opportunity for a client looking to come in and buy out. So in the commercial real estate, we're telling our clients coming to us and we're saying be patient and be selective, because you're in the driver's seat right now. You can be patient and selective. Choose your properties wisely, choose your locations wisely, and make sure you know exactly what you want to do with that property and what your build out is. Given the current effect of COVID in changing the way that businesses are doing business. In other words, letting professional services, especially letting people work remotely. That's going to change their commercial needs going forward for years to come. And there are a number of leases that are currently in effect that we don't know what is going to happen to those properties when those leases expires. Currently, they're under contract, but those leases are going to start popping, and we don't know what the effect is going to be on the market, the commercial market. So, from a focus perspective, I would say stay away from properties involving professional services industries. Medical will always be there. Those are good. Governmental will always be there. Those are good. Focus on those. Professional services, until this all pans out, accounting, tax, financial services, brokerage, they're all moving away from the downtown office spaces, and they're spreading out. Right. And the dust hasn't settled from that yet. So I'm kind of telling clients to be very selective if you're thinking of going into those types of commercial properties.
Right. What about the your clients that are looking at developing, or they have developed residential rentals?
Yeah, that's big now. So I have a number of clients that want to put together private equity funds to invest in residential rental right now. That's big. Residential rental, residential condominiums, targeting younger professionals, the millennials that are just starting, forming families, getting married. That's a big market right now. We see, and you've probably seen in the news, that the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of this country is coming up over the next 10, 20 years. Right. There's a number, there's a tremendous amount of wealth that's going to be transferred. A lot of that wealth is going to be used to buy residential properties from the beneficiaries of these trusts. So, the thinking is from my clients is that is going to be a very good market coming up.
So, and I'm going to assume that your answer to this is going to be people need to be patient. But it seems like the current administration is continuing to because of COVID, continuing to push not letting people being kicked out of their properties and things like that if they're not able to pay rent.
Yeah, I mean, it's only delaying the inevitable. In my opinion, those kinds of policies are just building a bigger bubble that's going to pop eventually. Eventually, this is all going to revert. And the only thing that's happening right now is a large amount of debt is being built up by people who are not paying the rent. Landlords are suffering as a result, and they have to deal with their banks who having to renegotiate financing. It's only delaying the inevitable. Inevitably, we will have to go back to a normal standard. Okay, renters have to pay your rent, landlords have to pay their mortgages. Okay, so we're only delaying that. When we get past that and that bubble pops, my clients perceive that there's going to be a nice opportunity to get into the residential market.
Right. Do you feel that that's going to, right now, that's driving down or will drive down the rental side of things, that if people are patient and have the cash sitting on the sidelines, that they're going to be able to jump in?
Yeah, if you're in a good cash position now, yes. Yeah, and if you can get into a good cash position, by moving some assets out of another sector and waiting patiently for the residential real estate sector, yes.
So, what are some of the challenges that you and your business has faced during this COVID period of time?
Well, as you may know, the legal profession is notoriously slow to adapt to technology. Right. So COVID has forced the legal profession to get up to speed and adapt to this whole new world of working remotely and using Zoom and Teams and allowing and letting go of the control of staff, letting them work remotely. And most importantly, the court system has had to adopt to this. I mean, the justice system essentially came to a screeching halt at the beginning of COVID, and they did not know what to do with this. But now you're seeing the courts, they've adopted, using Zoom and online hearings for trials now, for regular hearings. They've told lawyers that, look, you can use this in litigation for depositions. And I don't think they're going to go back. The courts and the judges have realized that, hey, this is kind of good. This allows us to clear out our dockets a lot quicker, okay, and a lot more efficiently than herding everybody into a courtroom and having them sit there waiting on their name to be called in a docket to clear out really minor issues that usually clog up the docket. So I don't think that they'll ever go back to the old way of doing things. For some things, yes, there are certain times when you need to be in court and need to be in front of a judge, and not just in litigation. There are certain times you need to be in front of your clients,
Right.
executing important transactions, wills, trusts, when it's very important, you need to be there. Everybody should gather in a room and talk, execute, document. But there are many times when you just don't. So, the the pain of not only getting your office to adapt to this new technological world, but working with other firms, right, and the courts,
Right.
with their adaptation of this new technology. Everybody's kind of had to move together in this direction.
Where do you see from a legal standpoint, executing documents are going to go? I mean, because I've heard some things where you're going to get it to where, you're going to be on camera, I'm going to be on camera, and you're going to watch me sign things.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to notarize it that way. Do you see
Yeah,
that's the way things are going to go?
It is. It's going to be slow. I mean, I'm using DocuSign as much as I can now, but executing contracts. There's a lot of old school attorneys that it's still like the wet signature in person with the notary right there, right? Because the whole point of that is that if there is litigation down the line, you don't have somebody saying, that's not my signature, I didn't know what I was signing, we didn't go through this, it was too informal, it was online, therefore it's not an effective contract, it's not an effective agreement. And there's also statutory requirements, right? There's a lot of statutory requirements that you have to have certain in-person signatures, and every state is different.
Right.
So both the custom of the legal practice and the state statutes have to catch up to the new reality, of the way we're practicing law. But do I see it going in that direction? Yes. We're probably going to have to see some litigation challenging this and
Right.
see that the courts are going to enforce this new way of executing deals. And once that precedent gets on the book, I think it's going to take off, because it's a better way of doing business. I also think what you're going to see when that does take off, you're really going to see the ability to have a multi-jurisdictional practice take off.
Yeah.
I sit here in Florida, okay, but I want to form an entity, a Delaware LLC with a client who may be in, California, okay. The various state bars are going to have to catch up, update their rules on what really constitutes the unauthorized practice of law in another state. When I'm doing that, where am I practicing law? Am I here in Florida? Am I here in Delaware? Am I practicing in California?
Right.
That's an open question that the states, they don't know what to do with yet, but they will have to catch up to this new way of doing business.
Yeah, I think that the next year or so, I think we're going to see a lot of changes, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, we were using Zoom before Zoom became popular, just because I do have clients outside of the state of Maryland. And I've just seen it to where the clients like it even more now, because instead of them, having to take a half day off of work to come in to have a meeting and stuff, we can hop on Zoom and, a half hour, they're not the time traveled and stuff like that. It's definitely, I think people have found that it's more efficient. And I think that a lot more people, you talked earlier about, people working from home and especially attorneys. I mean, accountants are the same way. We kind of came into it kicking and screaming, no, my person's got to be here in my office. And we really have found that you don't need that, because there are, again, you can tell, okay, are you getting the work done or not? So I think it's definitely
there are many ways to measure accomplishments, production. You don't, we're just so used to the old-fashioned way of seeing someone work as a measure of how productive they are, right? Okay, well, their head's down and they're at a desk, they must be doing something.
Right.
We don't need to do that anymore. We can fly by instruments, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I think it's, I talk with my clients, and they actually tell me that the ones that are working from home, they actually tell me they're putting in more hours now than they were before, because they get up in the morning, they go down, they check their email, they kind of get get going
Sure.
that way, and they officially haven't even started their day.
Right.
So it's
I've
definitely,
heard that.
yeah,
Yeah, I've heard from people saying that they're having the opposite problem than people anticipated. People thought that they wouldn't work as much from home, and it's really the opposite. They're not turning off the clock. They keep working. They're working after dinner. They think, well, it's right here. I can do this. I can get this done. I can, So I've heard people saying, I have to force myself to shut it down.
yeah. And I think that, again, good and bad with everything. And I think that that's going to be one of the things that we're going to find is that, people aren't going to know how to shut it off, and take away, because a lot of them, have, especially back when, kids were going to school virtually, you had the whole family in the house and everybody was in different places in the house. So, the dining room table was your office. So,
Yeah, right.
I think that is changing things also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating time that we're going through right now, caused by, a tragedy of COVID, but the way it is going to force people to do business in the future is very fascinating. And it's going to be interesting to see the migratory effect of all this,
Mhm.
on population shifts, say, well, okay, well, wait a minute, if I can work for Apple out in, California, okay, but I can work, and I can work from anywhere. Well, now people are going to start moving out of, high cost areas into low cost areas, right? To maximize the dollars that they're making.
Well, and I think that that's something that's going to be curious, because I have a lot of clients that work for the federal government, and they're being told right now that, you're remote for the foreseeable future. So a lot of them are thinking about, okay, hey, I may move to some place that's not as expensive, but then the question is okay, if they're living in a place that's not as expensive, are they going to continue getting the same salary that they were when they were commuting into
Right.
the city?
Who should get the benefit of those life choices, right? Should the
Right,
employer or the employee, right? But we know it's kind of a negotiation, right?
right,
And there's a little bit of give and take. But at first, usually the benefit goes to the employee, right?
right.
So you'll get the benefit at first. But it will be interesting to see how those choices affect compensation, and expectations. Why should you get the benefit of my choice to live here? Why
Right.
not? But what it's going to affect is the concept of what's fair market value wage.
Yeah. Well, and with the number of job openings that there are right now,
Yeah.
I think it's going to continue favoring the employee for now, at least.
Yeah. Right now, the employees have the hammer,
Yeah. Right.
and the employers are the nail. And,
Right.
it goes back and forth, right?
Yep. So tell us, what was something that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out in your practice?
Oh, I've been asked this before, and it's the fact that it's never too early to start building your brand. You can start building your brand in high school, in college. Start building out your network, building your brand, letting people know what you stand for. What are your principles, your values, no matter what you do, no matter what field you go into. But letting people know immediately who you are and what you stand for and what your personal brand is. You can never start too early building that, and staying in touch with people. So whether you become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, financial advisor, they'll know that you stand for certain things, certain principles and values, no matter what you do, and they can rely on you for that. People like to work with people they know, like, and trust. So
Right.
let people know that you're likable and they can trust you early on.
Yeah, I think that's definitely important. I think the other thing that you kind of said in there too is, talking with people and making sure that you continue that. I find with a lot of my son's friends, when they come over, it's like, okay, I kind of make them stop and actually talk to me, and not just hi and keep going, because they're all, doing this all the time. And it's like, yeah, it's like, no, we're going to have a conversation, put the phones away, let's have a conversation.
Yeah, but heads up. Who are you? Tell me who you are. Tell me
Right.
what tell me about your background. People start forming opinions and judgment about you just based on that little bit of information that you give them, and that stays with people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely think with the younger generation, getting them to look us in the eye when they talk to us also. Because there's too many times, like you said, they're either this or they're just, have their head down trying to talk to you. And it's like, no, look up here so I can look you in the eye and I can
Focus.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about working with your dad. You said that, that he's an attorney and you kind of are following in the footsteps.
Yeah. He was my mentor, my champion early on, and gave me a lot of sage advice, about what practicing law is and isn't. He told me one thing we talked about, I think, before we started the podcast, about not trusting the quote unquote experts. A lot of people hold themselves out to be experts. And he said, always be willing to challenge their opinions. He said, a lot of people, they may have earned a reputation for being an expert, but they'll, over time they'll get lazy and they'll just rely on their reputation. So always be willing to challenge them. And you'll find out many times you were right to challenge them. So he's a wonderful man.
Great advice.
Yeah,
really
always willing to speak truth to authority. He was he was just a wonderful human being. He was in World War II, passed a few years ago. Working with him was the best experience in my legal career.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because you're right. Lots of times, people, when they've been doing something for so long, they do get lazy, and pushing back a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. When you're working, especially when you're working with a professional, pushing back a little bit and, well, why are we doing it this way? Type thing. There's times where it's just like, hey, you got to trust me on this piece or whatever. But the pushing back definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and a good professional should welcome that.
Yeah.
On the other side, I mean, they should welcome pushback, because it makes you both better.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that to me, staying sharp and having to explain why you're doing something does help, keep you sharp. But then it also kind of sometimes makes you stop and walk back through it. And maybe for this particular person who's questioning you, maybe this isn't the right path for them too.
Right. Exactly.
So, Paul, we've gone over a lot of stuff. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
Oh my God, there's so many things
that's endless
to ask, right? It's endless. There's so many questions you can ask where we could start. But no, I think we've covered everything. But just to reinforce what we've really all discussed, when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out a new business, it's like in real estate, you can build the greatest house, most beautiful house in the world, but if it's not built on a solid foundation, okay, it's going to collapse. Okay, so building out a foundation for your business initially with a good team of advisors, okay, is extremely important. But they're only as good as your willingness and ability to use them. One thing I'm sure you've seen is that new businesses starting out, they're very cost conscious, and they're very, and so they're very unwilling to pick up the phone and call that advisory team because they're concerned about the cost. So I think if you can alleviate those fears and say, look, I'm not going to hit you for every single time you pick up the phone to call me, but I am telling you, we will have a much better working relationship if you are not afraid to call and ask me a question before you do something, as opposed to after. So put together a good team, use them. Don't be afraid to use your team.
Yeah, great advice. Paul, if people like what they hear and they want to reach out to you, talk to you, get some help from you, how can they reach you?
Sure. Well, my website is www.donovan.law. My Twitter handle is @Donovan Legal. I'm also a freelance writer for a website called simplifyllc.com. On there, I write a lot of articles for small businesses, how to get started, with a lot of good articles about what questions to ask, when to ask them to your advisors. So you can find me on there. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. And if you want to be old fashioned like I am, you can just call me. My phone number, 781-575-0055.
Great. I appreciate your time today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Gary. Great to be here.
So today our guest was Paul Donovan, who's the founder of Donovan Legal PLLC. See you next week.